Okay, let us conclude this idea, this 22nd letter of not turning our back or trying to escape the pain and suffering, but looking at it face to face and recognizing that it's from God's inner desire, and that we should accept it. Okay, so now that that I accept it, it's coming from God and it's coming for my good. So what do I do? Right? That I'm suffering in some material way or some physical way. So the Alter Rebbe says that we should take the advice, the counsel of our sages, as it says in the Talmud, mifashbish b'maisav. You should examine your own conduct, and perhaps you'll find there something that needs cleansing, and God is now scouring your soul in order to bring cleansing. That's really what He wants. So rather than seeing it as something to escape, see it as something to accept in order to bring you to a greater refinement. And he gives a metaphor for this. Imagine a great, awesome king who, out of an immense love for the only child that he has, personally washes off the filth of the child, changes the diaper. The king can have a lot of, servants, maid servants to do that. The king does it himself out of a great love for the child. So that's what God is doing to us. We've dirtied ourselves, right? We've stained our soul. And so God is coming to clean us, to scour the soul. So what will happen when we recognize that? So as the saying goes, water, as in water, a face reflects a face. So we're understanding now that this is coming from God's great love for us. So that will arouse a love for us when we understand how precious the nature of God's love is. That the divine love is dearer and better than all kinds of worldly love of any material, physical, or even spiritual things. As the verse says in Tehillim, how precious is your loving kindness. For your chesed, your kindness, is better than life. So this is God's kindness that is greater than life. And His kindness is a manifestation of His love. So when we recognize that, then that should bring us to accept this, to fix what we need to fix. And when we fix what we need to, in other words, we accepted the rebuke, we're fixing what we need to fix, then what will happen is then we transform the hidden love that God has expressed to us by the rebuke, by the suffering that we're going through, and then that will be transformed into a revealed love, which is the concept of the divine severity, the gvurais, that would be sweetened at its source, and therefore actually removing the severity. So and that's the conclusion of this part of the letter. Let's unpack this. So the true love of God is that He wants to bring us to a higher, cleaner, purer state of being. And therefore, there's things that we go through, bumps on the road, painful experiences, physically, materially, things that are painful. And ultimately, it's out of a great love in order that we should recognize that there's something that we need to fix. And when we recognize that it's coming from God, so we don't try to escape it, we try to deal with it. And ultimately, it's like the king who's changing the diaper of the child. Does he want the diaper to want the child to sit in the diaper? No. So he's coming to cleanse. Sometimes child sitting in a warm, it gets warm sort of when you make in your diaper, and the child kind of likes it and screams when sometimes when being cleansed, because it's not so comfortable at that moment, scrubbing away the filth. But that's a child. When we're a mature adult, so we recognize it's coming from God, then that gives us a way that we can look at it, look at this as coming from His lovingness, and to try to fix whatever we need to fix. Wow. This is something that is, we have the capability. The Alter Rebbe wants that we, in other words, don't go to the righteous tzaddik, to the Rebbe, to try to alleviate that. Although Chassidim had a great difficulty with this, because before this, the Alter Rebbe would answer questions. After this, he also answered questions when it came to this area. He even sanctioned such conduct. So perhaps, the answer is, I tell people all the time, write into the Rebbe, to the oil, for a bracha, in things in your life that you need, things that you're suffering and going through. And the Rebbe would want that. So then, what is the point of this letter? Perhaps the point is that we need both things. Write in, and at the same time, recognize that this is coming from God, and therefore deal with fashish b'maisav, look inside and try to take whatever you need to take from this difficulty that you're going through, to use it as an opportunity to grow from. And that through your own power and strength, you can actually sweeten the severities. I think, my personal thought on this is that both things can coincide and live together. But not to merely kind of try to escape it by getting the blessing of a tzaddik, of a rebbe, so you don't have to deal with it. I think that's ultimately what the Alter Rebbe is. Now, if you're not holding by that, write into the Rebbe anyways for a bracha. But by the way, don't just write in when you need something. As the Rebbe would call it, tzoros Chassidim. Chassidim, followers that are, when they have a tzara, when they have a problem, when they have a difficulty, when they have something that's painful, that's when they write into the Rebbe. But as I've mentioned myself before, the Rebbe gave me a blessing, actually, for our third son, with whole, won't go into the story now, but he said, Tavasri Toiv, give me over good news about the birth of son, and where there were questions and challenges from the doctor. In the end, the Rebbe said, give me over good news, and that's exactly what it was, good news. Being almost 2 months overdue. my wife. Again, we'll tell the story another time. And give me over good news. So that I took that as a message years later, actually. Give over good news. We always have to give over good news. So, questions, comments, thoughts on this heavy duty. So let me, on Facebook, I have several questions here. Let me find them. Reminder, 2 question marks before you ask a question. All right. Alice has a question. Did she put a question mark? I don't see it. Alice's question. I'm sorry. Put 2 question marks. Oh, here. People consulted the Rebbe on these matters of trouble and disease. How does it fit? Okay, so we explained that. Okay, if someone is going through physical pain and suffering, is it the same cause as if someone is suffering spiritually, emotionally, or mentally? Whatever suffering a person is going through, whether it's physical or spiritual, emotional, psychological, it's all a suffering that a person's going through. It means what the Alter Rebbe is telling us: look inside and try to deal with it instead of running away from it. So, yeah, there isn't a difference. Okay. June, does God cause or allow, or is it both? Well, look what he just said. The metaphor of the king, a mighty, awesome king, changes the diaper of his own child. Now, you might think, well, what do you mean? Wouldn't be a good father otherwise. First of all, it's a metaphor. And, I would imagine not too many mighty, awesome kings ever changed the diaper of their child. They had plenty of servants, maid servants to do that. And even the queen probably didn't even do it, right? Now, right or wrong, that's irrelevant. That's not the point over here. It's just that to bring out how awesome it is that when we dirty ourselves, so God's not sending an angel, he's not sending, he's not sending Satan, right? It's himself who's cleaning us, right? The trouble that we're going through. When we recognize that, so, okay, let me look the king in the eye and accept it. And then look inside me. Where can I grow from this? That's the concept. Okay. Davida, still waiting for a full story. Okay, yes, it will come. It will come. Okay. Let us go to Jeffrey. Please share with us.
Chag Sameach, Rabbi.
Chag Sameach to you.
So, a couple of things. One, it's very intriguing. Maybe you don't want to talk about it in detail now, but the idea of how you've described Chabad as different from Chesed in terms of giving you the tools. I thought that was
Yeah,
But
I can elaborate on that if you want me to now, a bit.
yeah, sure, go, please.
So, um, although we are very, it's very central to us, the idea of a Rebbe, and in particular in our generation, our Rebbe, yet, as the Rebbe said on his inaugural, uh, talk or Fabringen in 1951, when he officially accepted the Nesias, the leadership of Chabad, he said, "Don't get any wise ideas. I'm not here to take over things for you. I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you with your own um, shtivyot, with your own foolishness, with your own darkness, with your own challenges in life, to help you to rise above it, to give you the tools that you could do it." That is, and other Hasidic circles, quoting from Chavkuk, the prophet, saying, the righteous tzaddik b'emunaso yichya al tikra yichya el yechaya. A righteous person lives with his faith. Don't call it he lives with his faith, but he nourishes and gives faith to others. Meaning that by the connection that you have to the righteous tzaddik, that connection nourishes your faith. That's but really it's sort of like you're held on to. He's like schlepping you along. In Chabad, that's not the method. The method is that you need to internalize the faith. Faith is something that is encompassing, that's beyond us. Chabad means chachma bina v'das, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. In other words, you have to internalize the faith, meaning make it your own. Yes, it's the Rebbe that gives you the teachings and gives you the wherewithal, but in the end, we need to internalize it. In other Hasidic circles, um, it's not about internalizing it; it's about connecting to their Rebbe to give them that, transcendent faith. And in Chabad, and that's what Chabad means, Chachma Bina V'das, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, is to internalize it and make it your own, have ownership on it. So that's in brief the concept, but it is yes, very it is unique. Is that?
But but the obvious juxtaposition, or it's obvious to me anyway, juxtaposition here is, as you mentioned about, writing to the Ohel, and, I've done it myself, wrote a nice long letter and ripped it up, whatever, and, it's very meaningful. It was very meaningful to me, and perhaps that's an example of a tool that I'm able to internalize. But so many times you hear of the stories of the rabbis, and perhaps you've even told many stories here of the situation where in Europe, and whatever year, they went to the rabbi, and the rabbi said, "Oh, go look, go. I don't remember the particular story, but you go down to this place and whatever, and you'll find your husband."
Right.
So how do those two things, and I'm sure that's Chabad. So how do those work together? I mean, you said before both are true, and I can accept that, but that's almost an oracle kind of approach. So how does that jive with this?
So I think what the Alter Rebbe is trying to do with us over here is to take more ownership of our lives, and that when we do have difficulties, when we are going through some kind of suffering, that we should recognize that this is coming directly from God, and that it's out of a love and not anything but that. And therefore, take the ownership, look inside, and see what you can do to fix whatever that you need fixing on the inside. At the same time, right into the IL, or if you have a Rebbe, whatever, and do seek that connection. It I don't think it's a contradiction to be able to at one point to look inside, and at the same point recognize that that a tzaddik, a righteous person, a rebbe, can help us to alleviate, that painful thing that we're going through. There was twice that I wrote into the rebbe before Gimel Tammuz for things that I was going through. I was once like 2 weeks flat on my back, sciatica, and I was, very painful. And I wrote into the Rebbe for a bracha, and actually by dollars, the Rebbe, I got an answer from Rabbi Groner, said to check my tefillin and mezuzahs, which oddly enough I just checked them 3 months earlier. But the Rebbe said to go check them, and actually I had some problems with some mezuzahs, even though I just had them checked. And they got them fixed, and Baruch Hashem, my back was got much better. I had 4 wisdom teeth taken out, so I wrote into the Rebbe for a bracha before, and Baruch Hashem, I only had to take one time a painkiller. So we do it, and I do strongly suggest that we continue to do that. And the Rebbe, and every Rebbe wanted that. At the same time, he wanted us to own whatever we can and to grow from it, and not just merely look to alleviate it. That's what the Alter Rebbe is coming to say over here, and so, they're not mutually exclusive, although. Although there were chassidim that whatever challenges they had, they kind of try to work it through, and but I think in our generation in particular, recognize it's coming from God. We still need help from above, and write in, ask for the blessings, and at the same time internalize it as best as we can and deal with it. I hope that helps, Jeffrey.
Oh yeah, all the help. I can use any help.
We can all. It all
works. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Also, by the way, just to give this, more of a wholesome approach, the fact that a person, would ask of a tzaddik, or whether from the Oyhel or like before Gimel Tammuz or whatever, that itself is a remarkable thing, to recognize that the physical thing I'm going through, the suffering I'm going through, the pain I'm experiencing, that a righteous person can help me with that. That itself is a real amazing statement that I would suggest most people don't recognize, and they would, let me just go to my, to my doctor, or, but to see that there's something spiritual here, and going to a Rebbe to help with the physical thing, is you are recognizing in that itself that this is something that transcends just the physical reality. That itself is a very powerful statement that a person is making, and shouldn't be thought of, as a small thing. Is that clear?
That's amazing. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing statement about an individual. Okay, let's continue. Liana.
Maybe you've already addressed this or said it, but the way that, talking about, how can we go to the Rebbe or to the Tzaddik, and then also say, hey, this is, accepted. I kind of see it in the physical realm as, sometimes for 2 reasons. I think that we need that balance. One is because a lot of people aren't there spiritually to say, yes, this is from, or to see this full picture. They might be able to say to an extent, but then, when it gets to a certain point, they're ready to throw their hands up. And having that someone there in between that says, kind of the buffer almost, I kind of see it as I'm sorry, thinking and talking at the same time, sometimes that can build resentment. Like the person can feel resentment against God because they don't fully see the love behind the action. Because sometimes that's very hard. Someone like loses a loved one. How do you see that loss as love from Hashem? And so that can build resentment, especially if someone seems to have, a hard time back to back to back. And having a righteous person to step in and say, okay, go do this and alleviate that, then you can't say, okay, that comes from Hashem, and you need that little bit of good within that bad to see it, to reset and say, okay, this whole thing is coming from Hashem. And I kind of see it as, sometimes as when you have a family, and I grew up with siblings, you couldn't always go to, mom or dad directly as one of the younger ones, because you're like, what do I say? How do I, what if I get rejected? And there's this fear of, I need to go ask dad for $5, but what if he says no? So you send the older one in, because he has that ability. That's kind of the reason why there's that, the oldest sibling kind of can speak the adult language and speak the kid language. He kind of can, work both ends from the middle, so to speak. And when he goes in, he can make that connection that maybe the younger siblings can't. And that's kind of how I can personify, or relate to why do we need the righteous person, and why can we go to that righteous person and say, help me here, and still accept this, experience from Hashem, is that there's a balance of balancing the spiritual and material. And I don't know if I said everything that's in my brain correctly, but that's kind of what my thoughts were when you were speaking.
Thank you, Leanna. Actually, it's a very good point that you're right. On our own, to the metaphor is a beautiful metaphor, but when you're going through the difficulty, to be able to think that, oh, this is a loving Father, the King, who is coming to bring the cleansing, it's a difficult thing. Absolutely, it's it's very easy to teach this. It's much more difficult to live this when we're going through it, and therefore, like you said, that when you have a tzaddik or a rebbe that is helping in giving the bracha, it also helps us to then be more accepting and of it, and recognizing that it is coming for our benefit, and therefore give us the capability to maybe to look inside and to try to fix what we need to fix. 100%. Yeah, definitely. And therefore the balance between them is definitely something that's going to make a huge difference. Now, there are some people, and this is the Alter Rebbe, perhaps, you have to remember, the Alter Rebbe wrote this over 200 years ago to Chassidim that were like, to followers that, I don't know how to describe, but like lofty souls that I guess he wanted that they should emphasize more of working it through themselves, and whereas I think in our generation we're not such lofty souls, and therefore we do need that help from above, from a tzaddik, from the Rebbe, 100%. We need that, and therefore I do always and still continue to always suggest write into the Rebbe if that's what you feel, connected to the Rebbe, to the Ohel, for blessings, and for whatever difficulties you're going through. And as I mentioned, for that alone, that you recognize that whatever mundane physical things or material things that you're going through and having trouble with, that you recognize that there's a righteous person that can give blessings to you, that itself is a great, awareness and recognition and powerful. Okay, so let me just continue over here. Alice, the Rebbe wanted leaders and not followers. You're right, absolutely. Absolutely. Is if we're suffering, dependent upon the actions to find what needs to be corrected. Right, so what do we need to, how do we know what we need to correct? Should I check my Tehillim mezuzah? Sometimes it might be a spiritual thing inside of me that I need to correct. Sometimes it is just a mitzvah that I'm lacking, like my tefillin mezuzahs. The Rebbe said that I should check my tefillin mezuzahs, even though I checked them 3 months earlier. But I took him to a different scribe because whatever, I don't know what happened. But the fact is, I had problems and those were fixed. Asher, didn't the Rebbe give dollars so that one should reset one's life via tzedakah, knowing that whatever it may be struggling with could be resolved and removed by our giving that dollar, or more hopefully a new one? Absolutely, you're right. As we've been learning so much about tzedakah, about being charitable, that through charity, you're right, it changes the reality. Absolutely. But that's also, again, recognizing that, wow, tzedakah, being charitable, can help in my physical, challenges. Think about it. That's pretty powerful. And a person should come to that kind of recognition, that kind of an awareness, that is super powerful. Most people think of, well, let me just go to the, to the doctor, right? Now that, by the way, this doesn't mean you shouldn't go to the doctor if you need something. It's not precluding that at all. Sarah, does this also apply to children who go through much and God is trying to bring them closer? Yes, and maybe it's to bring the parents closer at the same time. Davida, what happens if you don't realize that your actions that you're causing are suffering and you don't know how to correct behavior? Yeah. I don't know what to answer to that. That's probably, it's definitely an issue. So, Yocheva, what happens if your husband if it is your husband, how can their wife talk to them? I don't know how to answer that. Good question. Yeah. If it's a loved one, we don't have control over it, so we don't have control. What can I tell you? Okay, I think I got to all the questions. Anybody else that I missed? Okay. All right, folks. Wonderful. How does one write to the Rebbe? That's great. So I'm putting up on the email is Rebbe@Chabad, Oil Chabad rather. Rebbe@Ohel Chabad.org. Or just go to Rebbe.org and you can get it there too, to the website. This is the email. And Rebbe.org, I think it is. I'm not missing. Oh, okay. So you got it. Yeah. Okay, beautiful. All right, folks. Amazing as always. And Adud Mayed, a mitzvah for the Jewish people during the holiday, for everybody, men, women, and children, to make a bracha on the lulav and esrog, the 4 kinds, the 4 species, sit in the sukkah, of course, and to celebrate the holiday. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Tzurich Kadeshim, Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you that Tanya. Have a wonderful day, a good Moyed, Moedim L'Simcha, joyous holiday.